To Mental Health Month with EYPC. My name is Terrence Jones, Regional Director of EYPC. I'm here with Tawanda Darden, CEO of the organization, and Dr. Reginald Wells, who is one of our clinicians. And we're joined by a very special friend, very special guest, Latasha Boone, who is the CEO of Who's Counseling. We're going to get into a really, really good discussion today. How you guys doing, man? Y'all doing all right?
Doing great.
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Outstanding. Dr. Wells, what you doing? You look, man, every time you log on, you just look deep in, you ain't
I want to make sure everything work out because I think this is going to be a great show, a great presentation today. So I want to make sure everything works out. So I'm kind of sending some things to everyone to let them know how to share, because I believe that when now this goes public, we're going to have to make sure we run this very well. So
gotta have it right. Latasha Boone, we are so happy to have you here for this conversation. Before we get into it, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about what you do and talk about your organization so everybody can know just how well versed you are in this community mental health field. So tell everybody who you are and whose counseling is.
Ain't he something, right? So, all right, Latasha Boone, Who Counseling Services. We have been serving the community since 2016. We are located 21st and Main in Richmond, Virginia. We are family owned, and that's one of the things I pride myself on. I will say that I've been in the mental health field now for probably about 15 years. We serve majority of adults, but we also serve children and adolescents. That is one of my specialties. I'm a registered play therapist, so I love playing. So that's one thing I pride myself on. But we recently started providing substance use disorder services, which kind of covers the topic we're going to talk about today, identity crisis. And oftentimes that tends to happen when we are going through transition in life. So that is definitely, so we open up the door so people start asking questions, but that's who I am, short and sweet.
Awesome. So yeah, just like Latasha said, today we're going to get into the subject of identity crisis. Now, I guess really since 2020, identity crisis has kind of taken a mind of its own. We're going to get into what identity crisis is and what it seems to mean now, which is the same and separate at the same time. But before we do that, let's not assume that everybody does know what identity crisis is. So Latasha, can you share with our audience, what is or how do you define identity crisis?
I define identity crisis as a moment in life in which we may be questioning just our place when we have had certain challenges or life situations that happen. We're talking about grief and loss. We're talking about divorces. We're talking about a transition from one profession to another. We're also talking about people who maybe have struggled physically and now having to make changes that impact their ability to move about and be independent. Is how I look at someone who's experiencing identity crisis. It is a time or a period in which we are questioning just what is our purpose in life and how do we make those changes, but we're at a point in which it seems like we have nowhere to turn.
Yeah. It sounds like a sort of like a mental crossroads, if you will. Dr. Wells, your thoughts? How would you define identity crisis?
she hit the nail on the head. And I think that we're just in a society right now that when involving identity crisis, there's so many different avenues to look at. For many of us, we've kind of watched the news reels and everything night after night. But the reality is that we want to make sure that we're looking at what has changed because of trauma. I've worked with clients where because of physical illness, all of a sudden they feel like their identity has changed. So is a wide range of things, but that person that we know, has it been altered by something from, internally or externally? So those are the areas we want to look at.
Yeah. Tawanda, what about you? How would you define identity crisis?
So for me, I think identity crisis is exactly what my colleagues shared. A lot of it is, as you trying to figure out who are you, right? Because a lot of times people are confused of who are you, whether you're in ministry, do you just show up as the preacher and forget to be the man or the woman, or you're the therapist, do you forget to show up as mom and a mom or a sister or a friend because you always in therapist mode. So I think sometimes the identity crisis sometimes makes us think who we are in this position, and do we lose who we are because we have elevated to another position, right? Or social media has definitely made identity crisis a real moment because everybody want to be what they see, but they don't understand half of what they see is false. And it's not true. So it puts especially our young kids in an identity crisis because I want to be the next Beyonce, I want to have the billions and the millions and all of those moments, and I want to look like her, right? So now I'm starting to shape what I look like and what I sound like and who I think I'm becoming based on a face reality of what I see. Right? Because then we talk about identity crisis, because guess what? If I ain't thin enough, if I don't sing enough, if I don't meet her marketing points when it comes to performance or her money, then I start doing some things differently. I thinking I'm not good enough. Right? Now I'm isolated. I think I'm not doing, I just don't think I'm important enough. I don't think I'm loved enough. I just go to those moments where now I'm really in a crisis within myself. Right. Because I wanted to be something that I'm not. Or I'm trying to become something that someone else instead of just focus on being me. So I think that's for me where I see where identity crisis has evolved, where it comes from every area of life right now, especially social media, man.
Yeah, I think social media, I really hate to harp on the social media thing, but I'm gonna tell you, I feel like social media is like the water for the identity crisis to grow, because, man, I'm gonna tell you, I know so many 45-year-old rappers. You do what you love. Do what you love. But it just interests me. It's just really interesting that this happens. And that brings me to this thought, because all of you brought out instances, things externally that can support an identity crisis. But let me ask y'all this. Is there something deeper? Is the divorce the identity? Is the divorce what leads to the identity crisis? Or is there an insecurity within someone's self that kind of supported the identity crisis? So is the insecurity, the match, and the divorce the gasoline, if I'm making any sense? Or is it always external, or is it internal that actually starts the quote unquote identity crisis? I guess what I'm asking is, what is the real root for someone who's experiencing an identity crisis? Latasha, what do you got? What do you think the real root is?
So I think it's something that Dr. Wells kind of touched on, someone who's experienced trauma. Right. So what we know is trauma does have the ability, it creates an environment, right, in which external stressors come into play. Right. But internally, if I have not yet addressed some of those deeper voices that have impacted me, then there's a high likelihood that I'm going to have troubles in interpersonal relationships, which impacts the ability for me to be able to socially engage in a marriage. It impacts my ability to be able to connect, or impacts my ability, let's be real, if I'm not financially capable of providing to the marriage, there's so many other factors that come into play that impacts the ability for someone to, and what I consider to strive. So the other piece comes into play. I'm not a medical physician, but internally hormonal imbalance. Correct. So there is some things internally, right, that we have no control over. And oftentimes no one is taking a thorough assessment to say, let me look at all the other factors before it comes into play where I'm heading to divorce. Yeah.
where does insecurity fall into this though? Because, you know, I often wonder, so let me take a step back. There are young men and women growing up in pretty decent neighborhoods that want to be from a certain environment kind of promoted by music. Usually we wouldn't say that that's an identity crisis, but if you're eating good and you're living good and you want to live the life of someone that has to struggle to survive, I would consider that an identity crisis. Am I off in saying that?
Well, I think Tawanda addressed this. She said, look at the influence of social media.
Right.
They make, right, or instill in you that is something to be very, very proud of.
Yes.
So I think when you're talking about insecurities, I think that comes into play as who am I around, right? So
who am I being influenced around?
That's it.
The influence.
That's it. Dr. Wells.
Yeah, Dr. Wells, talk about that a little bit. How much do influences play a part in either facilitating an identity crisis or just having a person getting further and further away from who they are at their core?
I mean, you're literally talking about childhood development issues from the beginning. And people, if they understand the importance of nature, nurture, shaping, all of those things come into play. If I'm a 3-year-old and everyone who's going through their childhood development, you talk about that pivotal age from 3 to about 5 or 6. And for me, and I've gotten even to some really good discussions with other African-American colleagues, therapists and psychiatrists, I pushed the age up, from 3 all the way up to 10 and 11 in our communities, because we're constantly inundated all day long. So part of our issues that we're struggling with persistently on the first part is what's happening at that moment that they're being nurtured. Who's doing the nurturing? Who's doing the raising? You're already shaping the identity of that child. Now, if I'm a child where in the home that even though I'm getting care and love and people are protecting me, but as soon as I step out, I'm hearing gunshots, that's shaping me too.
Right.
Or, I come from down South Georgia. So I'm walking out, I'm dealing with what we used to call the railroad tracks. We weren't allowed to cross those tracks after a certain time. And we were thinking like, are we on the poor side? Or are we on the bad side? Even though our top students for the year I was going to high school, all of them were Black almost.
Right.
But we still had that mentality, something shaping us. And so I think as we become adults, as we've said before, we carry that right into our adulthood. And now, funny thing about it is some tragedy or something happens. Now we're running into that crisis. I mean, the crisis with the identity being shaped again.
Yeah. Tawanda, you talked about that influence to it, and it really seems like we're really discussing how powerful influence is for someone's identity. But here again, there are adults that are dealing with the same type of identity crisis, from social media. Do you think that also stems from childhood, like Dr. Wells is talking about? Do you think it's something new, some deep desire to want to be somebody, and then social media lets you, kind of act that out in a sense? What do you think?
I totally agree. And I remember studying about a theorist, and I want to say it was Eric Erickson, who stated that developmental, how you're taught at an early age, how you're upbrought at an early age, what you're connected to at an early age, definitely influences how your mind will think, react, and attach to things, right? So even as you get older, if all you saw is someone building a house, now you want to be a builder, right? Now you want properties everywhere. And then you see it on social media. Now it's in front of you every single day. You're going to get attached to that. And you're going to try to be that person again, being this. Now we're adults now. We're trying to be them because we see the success. We see their hard work or what appears to be success. Right. And now we're willing to do anything to get that because this is what we see.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of attached to it, right? So I think sometimes that as an adult that we're easily influenced too.
Yeah.
You just said it earlier. You got grown men still trying to be rappers.
Still trying to be rappers.
You got grown men still trying to be
Yeah.
rappers.
Yeah.
You know, you have us women still thinking we can be a size 2. Okay.
Yeah.
By what we see.
Yeah. Wow.
And
That's so
that
powerful.
really affects the identity crisis. I'm just,
That's so powerful. That is really so powerful because you really touched on something that eye gate. You know, that eye gate. If you allow that type of stuff to get in your eye gate, it can definitely affect, your security, what you think about yourself. Wow, that's so powerful. I want to dive into this a little bit. So, and Dr. Wells, you talked about this. You kind of touched on this, but I want to go a little deeper. So, there are men and there are women who come from tough circumstances and impoverished situations, and then they make it, and they're successful. But that success, it kind of frightens them a little bit because they're the first ones to go to college, and they're the first ones to own a business, and they're the first ones to make six figures, and they're the first one to have a successful marriage in their extended family. And they may go through an identity crisis. They may say, I'm not from this. This is new to me. And I've heard stories of people breaking down in a sense or having a mental breakdown because they've been successful. I think some people term it as survivor's remorse. Has anybody ever heard of that? Does anybody have that experience? Dr. Wells, you shake your head.
So we have people that, and we could probably count on all fingers and toes of individuals that decide that I don't want to be in this situation anymore. Yes, I got parents or I had a relative that raised me that says go to school, get in the military, get your own business, make it work. I have a relative right now that, they were told that they weren't going to amount to anything. They had made some mistakes in the whole 9 yards. They're right now working on 7-figure business that just blossomed because they stuck with it. But they were being persistently challenged as, is this who you're supposed to be and is this your role?
Right.
So I tell people consistently, you have to challenge your own thoughts first.
Wow.
And it's okay for you to challenge the mindsets of others. Have those conversations. Some they're going to be tough conversations. And, sometimes you got to, love people at a distance when they're not willing to give you the support that you're asking for.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go again with that surrounding. Latasha, what do you say to the person who they made it, they're successful, but in the back of their mind, they remember sleeping on the floor and they remember all those hard times and they're grappling with the fact that I'm walking this way, but it seems like I'm still that young person back there. What do you say to that person?
So I would say to that person, that it is your destiny to be where you are. That there comes a point in life when you have to put down old things, old people, right? Are those people who are at a stage in life where they're not healthy for you. I often tell individuals that I work with that everybody whose family ain't blood.
Right. Yeah. Blood just means you're related. Doesn't mean you're family.
That is it. So you find, and I know Tawana can attest to this, that being in business, right? And sometimes being a female business owner, we can look as if we're not tough enough. And we are looked at upon as well as that when we make decisions regarding our companies, that we're known for making decisions based on our heart. And when you try and make them based on, right? And oftentimes you're looked at upon as if, you can, and we're saying that's not it. It's not that we make these decisions on a whim. It's backed up by business data and experience. Right. So I would say for those individuals that have made it and you still kind of struggle with what we're talking about is self-esteem, right? Is what we're talking about. It's constantly challenging ourselves and telling ourselves every day that this is our destiny and we deserve it when we put the work in.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's what it's about. It's about putting the work in, and it's about saying to yourself every day that I have earned this.
Yeah.
I have earned this life. So the people we work with, we have to tell them every day, you have earned this. You have earned the right to be in a healthy relationship. You have earned the right to get in a job that people weren't expecting for you to have. right?
Right.
You've earned it. So be proud of yourself that
Yeah.
you're able to do that.
Yeah, I often tell people, you know, your past only impacts you if you allow it to impact you. But if you put your past in your past, you can continue to move forward. We got a question here. It popped up on the screen, but I want to bring back. Antoine, I want to ask you this. We got a question that says, how about a child who identifies with a Brady Bunch family style? So, you know, if you're 18 or something, you might not know Brady Bunch, but you know, Brady Bunch was perceived as this perfect family. You know, they were a blended family, but they were perfect. You know, and nothing ever went wrong. And
the Wells don't raise his hand.
Put me in the game, coach. Put me in the game, coach.
But here's the other side. So you feel like you identify with the Brady Bunch, but where you actually come from is dysfunctional. So you like the Brady Bunch, but you come from good times. How do you do that? What do you say, Tawana? How do you deal with that?
So I think a lot of times that again, our kids are very, very emotional, but yet very influential children, right? So they're going by what they see. They're going by what they see. So guess what? I might be hanging out like a Brady Bunch family, right? Going around my homegirl's house and they the Brady Bunch family, right? Like everybody eating together, laughing together, praying together, doing all these moments together. But we still got our issues. There's some mess. There's some dysfunction. And I think sometimes that children or as adults, every family got some dysfunction. I want to be very transparent when I say that. There is no perfect family. And I think when we learn to understand it's okay to have some dysfunction in your family, because I believe even in dysfunction, there's healing. There's breakthrough, right? Because I can't address the problem if I don't know there is a problem.
Right.
So when dysfunction shows up, it takes parents a moment to step back. What could I have done differently?
Yeah.
How could I handle that differently? So now the kids that's seeing it, because guess what? Girl, my family got it together, but they don't know that every night mom and dad fussing. That's not what they telling their friends. All their friends showing up, they showing up in the finest clothes, the cars, the house is nice, but they don't know that every night my parents are arguing, or my daddy's sleeping with Joe Blow, or my mama smoking marijuana. They don't know that dysfunctional part because the kids go and hide it.
Yeah. No, you're right. Here's the first thing I want to do, though. Let's affirm the fact that Brady Bunch is not normal. That there's no such thing as a normal. We gotta stop that right there, because you know we get caught up in, if something looks like this, you know, and presents like that, then that's the right way to do it. But that is not. There's no such thing as a normal family. Every family has a level of dysfunction that are operating. Now, some people wear that jacket a little better than others. That's just what it is. But every family is something.
We talked about that yesterday.
But you remember too, when Bill, does everybody remember when Bill Cosby came out, the Bill Cosby show?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And you remember, if you remember the first two episodes, and you can go back and look at the documentary about, the show. The first two episodes, actually the first three, most people said it looked like, quote unquote, a normal family. The furniture looked normal, the house looked normal.
Mm-hmm.
But then Bill Cosby said, I'm going to change this to let people know that there are more families that look different, and they got nice homes, they got nice cars. Guess what? In that documentary, they said you had families that enjoyed seeing it because of the comedy and everything else, but you had families that lashed out because they said, I liked the original three. Why did y'all change it? Mm-hmm. And so for our kids now, they're going, like you said, mention social media. When even my daughter right now, my wife and myself have to constantly look at her social media, because what's being presented is, here's the family that, they get to play with toys all day. They're going on vacation all day. And we had to sit down and say, yeah, that's maybe them, but that ain't us. Guess what?
I know exactly the people that you're talking about.
We have to take care of you. We here to love you, and that doesn't differentiate. But if you don't have parents that don't put that difference on there, this child is walking around like, well, why can't we go on vacation every day, or why can't we play with these brand new toys, or why are we not getting all these things? Yeah. So, again, starting from childhood, stuff is being agreed. We got a whole new group of kids, because right now social media is a big thing. I was going to try to share a piece, but I think for some reason it keeps crashing. But there's a drawing that I was going to share that shows that right in the middle, our kids now, they're pulling everything from, it says parent, social media, and they're pulling from both, creating an identity. And most of the experts saying, yes, they're being influenced by these things, but it should not be in the middle like parents. It should be friends and education. Social media should be somewhere on the outside. But for a lot of our kids now, it's right there in the middle, along with the parent.
That access to social media, the one thing that social media does do is it just takes the speed up. So a lot of the things on social media we've seen before, but we didn't see it in such rapid succession. You hear about your favorite artist. Back in the day, you might watch your MTV Raps like once a week, but now you can see your favorite artist every 3 minutes on social media. So it's really tough, really, really tough. Look, let me change gears a bit. What is the difference between growth and, I guess, the growing pains that one can experience and an identity crisis? Because I think, if not all of us, some of us can say we are not the same person that we were 20 years ago. We are completely, if the person that is on this stream right now were to talk to the person 20 years ago, we would look at that person and be like, man, what is wrong with you? Would that be an identity crisis, or would it be growth? And if there's a difference, what is that difference? Latasha, what would you say? What's the difference between growth and identity crisis?
So I'm going to say for identity crisis, it is impacting my ability to function, right? I can say it may be impacting my job. Sometimes you can see the early signs of depression, the early signs of anxiety, right? I'm not able to navigate in this world. So immediately I am being impacted individually, as well. It could be impacting my family or my ability to just live. I think when it comes to growth, I think I'm able to see, and when I look in the mirror, I'm able to see someone that's really different from the day they were yesterday. Somebody who's thinking different than they were yesterday. I'm walking around and I got a stride that can't nobody stop.
Check.
That's growth, right?
Come on, sis.
And I can look around and I can see people that are coming to me, but it's also us joining together and we're being a collective. I got people around me that are interested in my well-being, right? That's what growth is I'm surrounded by people. I'm going to places that are positive, right? And I'm appreciating those that have invested in me. A crisis, it's going to be hard for me to see those people around me.
Yeah.
More than likely, I'm isolating myself.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't know which way to go. So for me, that is the difference.
It's really, I like the way you ended that, because for me, that defining line between attracting people who are growing with you and isolation, that right there. And I hope people who are listening caught that, because that right there could be the defining thing. Are you growing, or are you in a crisis? Because if you're growing, more than likely you're attracting people that's on that direction of where you're going. But if you're in a crisis, you're isolating yourself. And I'm gonna tell you something. One thing the enemy likes to have is somebody who's out there all by themselves. That is a prime weapon for that type of person. Let's see what we got here. We got, okay, but as a counselor, you see it's not the Brady Bunch, but the child believes it is evident in conversation.
False evidence.
Yeah. Talk about that, Tawana, that false evidence piece. Let's go there.
So I think sometimes it's so again, when you're talking, are we talking about a child? Are we talking about teenagers, or are we talking about a child with a teddy bear? right? I think we got to understand that too, right? Because it's okay to manipulate a little bit to make them understand something. But when we're talking to our teenagers, it's time to really, really start being real with them, right? And telling them the truth, because what we do is set them up for failure if we don't have that courageous, uncomfortable, real conversation with them. And a lot of times that's what we do as a society. We put band-aids on conversations. No, rip the band-aid off, let them go through the stitching so they can heal. And part of healing is understanding, what does this really mean? We got to help our kids. We can't give them the teddy bear, the cuddling. It's good in the moment with their age, when they 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. But once they get to an age of 11 and 12 where they can understand, because when we know better, we do better, right? When they understand it and they can understand it and not feel like, oh my God, my world's about to crash because this ain't the Brady Bunch, right? But if we keep giving them false things, we're giving them a false hope and a false reality. It's time for us to get real and have truthful conversations with our children, because they need to know that while that was them and it was a TV show, that wasn't real life.
Wasn't real life.
So know the difference. Yep. That was a TV show. Real life, I'm not saying that this can't happen, but this is not what's happening today in our family.
Yeah. And I like to, and this is something I like to do, I like to share with my daughters, my family, some of the great things that we have going on in our own family. I like to highlight the positives of things that we got going on. So what Dr. Wells was talking about, I'm not going to mention the name of the YouTuber, but and then people playing with new toys every single day. They going to Hawaii and Maui, and they going to, and all that type of stuff. And like, man, look, and I tell them, hey, look, do you want to be on the plane for 11 hours every day? No, I don't want to do that. I say, well, look, we get to relax and play with the dog in our yard. Look at the freedom that we have, because
but a lot of those episodes are pre-taped.
Not pre-taped, they're rehearsed,
and they're acting.
They're acting.
They're
acting. But the goal is to show my children what we have going on in this house is a blessing. And it's a great thing to have. We have each other. We have a lot of things that we enjoy, that you enjoy. And while that might look nice, what it takes to get that, and it's still fake, I don't know if you want to go through that. And so I try to harp on that as well. Why do you think? Because in 2023 and 2022, it seems that identity crisis is only being synonymous with gender identity. And we just spent about 40 minutes, about 30 minutes talking about identity crisis and didn't bring up the gender thing yet. But why is it that is where, everybody's mind goes these days, and that you are in an identity crisis if you're having a gender identity crisis, or you're thinking about your gender identity? Why do you think that is being so promoted when we talk about identity crisis? What do you think, Dr. Wells?
So I was getting ready to swing for the fences with the gender, with sexual orientation and everything. We're in a time right now where we can look at it from a clinical perspective. You can look at it from a father. You can look at it from, what your religious belief is, me being a Christian and so forth. I think the biggest thing we're looking at is a society at this moment that is still struggling with identity as a whole, period. And so what's happening right now is that you have so many influences that are clearly saying that whatever helps you to feel good, whatever helps you to feel like you're in a place, that's what you need to go to. How many times we work with kids and they go, yeah, I'm non-binary, or I'm this, or I'm that. And you begin to ask key questions about, do you understand that? Is this more because I grabbed? Because right now, all these people now are coming to me and they saying that they can, with identity, our biggest thing, when we talk about identity crisis, a lot of times we have to define the two words. We got to be able to identify. Identity is not only how we identify ourselves, but how do we identify with other people? And so we run into that crisis when identity isn't matching up with something. Everybody in the family are entrepreneurs. That didn't happen with me. Moving to gender identity. Everybody is, here goes mom and dad is married. Here goes sister who loves her boyfriend. But all of a sudden I like guys. Or I've been sitting here wearing boy clothes all this time, but I do feel like a female. And now I go in and I have that conversation. And now everybody's like, well, why is this? Or what's going on? You have the parents that go, where did I fail? Because they feeling like somehow I had to have did something wrong. I always remind people, you got to remember, right around, well, I don't know about my daughter. I thought at 2, she started putting together plans that I didn't know. But you got to remember, when these children are born, they got brains. These brains are developing, and they're, right around 5 and 6. I know some 7-year-olds right now that are struggling with, gender identity and other things. So I think in our society right now, it's open because we got access to social media. We got access to music. We got access. People are having these conversations. And in the Black community, the stigma that was there was, you might feel like this, but don't have that conversation. Right. Now we're in a place where we're having those conversations, so more and more people are saying, I'm jumping in the pool and I'm jumping in the deep end now.
Yeah. And it becomes also too, it's what we see. It's so influenced. It's influencing every single day. You got cartoon characters now that's showing our kids. You got Target that now has a line for babies, infants out of the womb. So it's so much influence. And so kids are confused. And I'm not going to say that they are confused. I think my younger kids can get confused because they just don't understand. Because I can be in a session and he's like, oh yeah, I like girls. Oh, okay. Why you like girls? I don't know, because everybody else do. That's not a good enough reason. I was like, okay, well, we still got work to do on that. Because if they don't understand all the elements that go with it, they are going to be confused. And then guess what? They're going to be in a crisis, y'all. Because they're doing what everybody else sees, because now it's normalized. They're not educating them. They're saying, oh, just do it. Oh, then nobody's talking about the danger. Nobody's talking about how they're having the same-sex bathrooms. And then you got a little a man in there that like boys, but you letting him go into one that's with a bunch of little boys, and then our little boys getting raped. No one's talking about what the safety looks like, what the all the other issues that comes with it. And right. What we're not saying is that you can't be who you are. You be who you are, but be the best of who you are. But make sure this is who you really say you are, because you understand everything, all the elements that come with it.
Yeah. I think as therapists, one of the things that I have 2 books that I've been really contemplating about writing, but one of them I wanted to write about being the honest therapist. And just, when we're asking those questions and we're having those conversations with individuals, I think that even as therapists, we go through an identity crisis a lot of times, because we're like, I understand best practice, and I understand the ethics behind, what we deal with, the person-centered and everything else. And also at the same time, we have to allow people to understand where we are, as my worldview and everything should not affect you. But if we're going to have that honest therapeutic relationship, if you ask me, I'm going to give you an honest answer. Yeah. As a clinical supervisor, how many times that I've talked to, therapists that are getting ready to get licensed and stuff, and they go, well, what do I say? And we say, we have to make sure that we're being honest. You don't have to give them your full story, but at the same time, if they ask that question, let them know what your view is to the point of how it can help them. Because in reality, they're going to face people that's going to have those questions. Well, why do you feel this way? Or why do you dress like this? Or whatever. And how do you navigate through that? Because we have a lot of folks that stop therapy or they stop ministering. Because guess what? Somebody walked in. I saw a video the other day where a family was dedicating a child. A guy came in, he had on a dress, and the minister said, you need to sit down. And so the whole family's like, what do we do? Do we just stand up here for the child's sake? Or this is our family member? And they asked that question, what do we do? And we're in that type of society. It is a crisis. Remember, we have to define those 2 words. And when we're dealing with crisis, that's just it. All the cards came to a head, bam. So how are we going to deal with this? How do we help the victims?
You got to have that conversation, and you got to understand to say it with, get out your own personal feelings, but say it in a way where we're also making sure they're educated and they're safe. And, because I can only imagine how that woman may have felt, because that's what she identified as female. She has a dress on. Just to be singled out like that.
Yeah.
Just imagine what she went through to even get there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's the crisis, y'all.
Yeah.
And we just have to be very, very, very careful, even as therapists, just even as people, how we look, how we talk at people, because we don't know that one thing we may say may really push them over the edge.
Yeah.
We don't got to like what they do. We just got to respect it.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to who they say they are, when you're dealing with the LGBT, when you're dealing with the binary and all of those different pronouns that they have, we just got to respect it. And I think that's what leads to, when everybody talk about the identity crises, they talk about that from the LGBT standpoint, because they're getting beaten up. Just here in Atlanta, a young lady got killed. Like, it's a crisis. And I think we got to be mindful on how we talk and treat people. And we don't have to agree with what they do, but we do have to respect them.
Yeah. Latasha, I want to give you a chance to weigh in on this.
So I think we're talking about a couple things. When I am working with adolescents, right? I do, especially working with parents and having family sessions. One of the things, I try, and Dr. Wells had mentioned about parents feeling as if it's their fault. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking with parents, I let them know you are not your child's only influence.
Right.
You are not your child's only influence. And one of the things I think the conversation starts off is, how would you like to be identified? Mm-hmm. Right off the bat.
Your sexual preference.
That's it. How would you like to be identified? And I think,
what is your pronoun?
The other thing is, they have not yet developmentally be able to handle and manage those conversations.
Correct.
Where they can even approach their parent, because they are confused, right, by some of the information they see online.
Right.
The other thing is, how many of us in high school, there was a peer group, they hung out together and we shunned them.
Yep.
Or we looked at them.
Yeah.
Right? That hasn't changed.
No.
Gotten worse.
Exactly. We are still looking at peer groups and individuals because they look different. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We have racism every day. People look at us and we're different. We still have a heart. We still bleed. We're not going to turn you away if I need your blood.
Exactly. Or I need mouth to mouth.
Exactly. I think the conversations need to start off as with the parent, because sometimes it is things that we have shown them where they may feel different, because we're not even just acknowledging of they're coming home. Oh, that's your friend now. We may ask questions where, why didn't you pick someone that's from your neighborhood?
Yeah.
Right. So we have to be mindful of the message that we are sending out, so those kids or our family members, right, are comfortable with having those conversations with us. Because right now, we need to have some self-reflection as therapists, as individuals, to make our people that we serve feel comfortable to have those conversations with us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. And let's slide into this so we can wrap this up. Latasha, what would you say to somebody who's listening? Because we had somebody come in and say they think they have identity issues. I don't know if he was joking or not.
We never know with him.
Yeah, you never know. So you might be right. What would you say to someone who feels like, you know what? After hearing you guys talk, I'm in the midst of an identity crisis. What would you say to that person?
Oh, wow.
And this is his response, y'all.
Yeah. Nope. I think I would say to the person or the individual, let's start off with those things that you see that have served you well before we get into a place of saying I'm in an identity crisis. Because today you had the courage enough to come in here and talk to me to even ask any of those questions. So you have some strengths already that's going to help you through whatever you're going through right now. So I'm always going to be strength-based. Currently, let me look at what you have right now before we get into a place where we're putting a label are we putting some type of a category on who you are? Because it very well can be something where you have all the things that you have from a standpoint that have gotten you to the place you are. So I would say, don't be quick to say that's what it is. Let's kind of talk about things first, and then let's get a bigger picture of where you are.
That's good. That's good. Dr. Wells, same question. What would you say to someone who's listening and say, you know what, I feel like I'm in an identity crisis right now? What would you say to that person?
I really wanted to read an excerpt from a book, but one of the things, definitely Miss Boone hit it on the head. One of the things that I would ask them again is, how do you feel about yourself? But there's a book that I like to share with a lot of people I work with. It's called it's from Edward Welch. It's called Shame Interrupted. Y'all might not be able to see it because of the blurring. But one of the areas that often comes up is, how do you feel about yourself, and if the person's dealing with shame. And I want to read this real quick from his book. It says, what is shame? Shame is the deep sense that you're unacceptable because of something you did, something done to you, or something associated with you. You feel exposed and humiliated. There isn't one mandatory definition or description for shame, but any definition will include certain elements. For example, you can expect images of being an outsider, naked and unclean, and don't forget shame's public nature. Guilt can be hidden. Shame feels like you're exposed every day. And usually I'm gonna have to ask the person, how do you feel about yourself? I experienced this. I remember writing an article almost about 3 years ago, and had actually posted the same thing. And I remember the one question that everybody kept asking, and I was telling them throughout high school, I dealt with shame every day. Even though I had great parents, even though everything was going well, I went through it every day. And the question that I was asked by people who grew up with me, they asked, why didn't you say anything? And the answer I had to give to them was, it wasn't that I felt guilty about my feelings, but because the shame was the thing that y'all saw when y'all saw me walking around saying I'm okay. When y'all saw me saying that everything is good. Shame has a way of literally, it acts like a mirror. Nobody ever looks at the back of the mirror and can tell who you really are. It's you looking in the mirror and you're describing to others what you want them to see. In other words, if I want to look good, I'm going to tell you I'm great, I'm fine, I'm wonderful. But at the same time, if you get to look at who I really am and ask those real serious questions, that's when you may find out the person may be dealing with shame that comes from years ago. And it has nothing to do with the parents. It has nothing to do with their environment. It could take one or two things that happens and they walk around with that for a lifetime. And we're talking about adults now that if you begin to ask them specific questions, they're dealing with that pain. So one of the things I would definitely say to them is a simple question such as, are you okay? And then sitting there in silence and letting them really answer themselves, am I okay? Do I like who I am? Do I like what I'm dealing with? Shame is a killer. And you can have people, and there have been times that Miss Darden has looked at me in the face and asked, am I okay? And I'll sit here and I'll say it, and I will admit, there were days that I weren't. But guess what? I get to present to you and say, I'm good, I'm all right, but I'm still dealing with some hurt and some pain inside that I've got to be able to have that conversation with someone, to be in a safe place, to be in a place where you feel worthy, you feel like you're wanted, you feel like you're needed. So sometimes you just got to put people in that environment where they have to be able to say, yeah, this is what I'm going through. This is the real me. Let them be vulnerable.
That's good. That's good. Tawanda, same question. What would you say to someone who, after hearing this conversation, they say, now that I think about it, some things going on in my life, and right now I'm at a place where I don't even know if I know who I am anymore. I'm in an identity crisis. What would you say to that person?
The first thing I would say, and probably the only thing I would say, is find someone you can trust. Talk to someone about it. Get in therapy, because I can tell you therapy works. Therapy will help you put things in different perspectives, because you're going to have someone that's going to listen to you. You're going to have someone to do some self-reflection with you. You're going to have someone to encourage you. You're going to have someone that push you and motivates you and show you that while you may feel like this today, if you do the work, you don't have to feel like this tomorrow. So I would definitely encourage therapy, therapy, therapy. Find that therapist, y'all. I don't care if you got to Google. I don't care if you got to call 988. Find that person that you can trust, confide in. It could be your pastor. to help you deal with you and your issues. And guess what? You're not the first one with the identity crisis. You're not going to be the last one with the identity crisis. Get the help so you can now tell somebody else it's okay to talk to somebody. It's okay to get therapy. That's what I would say to them. But Terrence, we got to address this.
Well, we're talking about this comment right here.
You said I have impoverished conditions, Mr. Sumler.
That wasn't the word that I used. I used some different words.
We're going to address it since you publicly put it out here. We're going to address it. So, Mr. Sumler grew up, and I'm sure he doesn't care me talking about it, with some different type of. Hold on, let me make sure.
He said something like that.
Oh, something like that. So that means he's engaged in a conversation. Anyway, the way he grew up is very strict and probably always making sure that he had enough, never having enough. So now as an adult, he's always making sure that he's always very mindful of how he spend money, very mindful of how much he's going to spend on different things in life. So I recall this conversation. We were at event and we was telling him that sometimes childhood trauma, things that we have experienced, can overspill in our adulthood, because the way he's still modeling the same behaviors that he was dealing with as a child now that he's an adult, and we're telling him you don't have to do that. Right?
I'm gonna go a step further.
I'm trying to be nice with it.
Well, because here's the thing. We all work in this field, and there's a difference between reacting off of what you have seen and practicing a behavior. Yeah, practicing a behavior is different than reacting from your upbringing. And so there are times when we see something and then we are acting unconscious of what we have seen. But then we get to a place where we are consciously seeing it and we are practicing the behavior. This young brother is practicing the behavior, and he's practicing it on purpose. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Now, I don't have all of the credentials. I'm just a minister of the gospel. And this is what I see.
think we all can touch and agree.
We can touch and agree. I think that fear gets underestimated when people move and decide to keep on a level of protection that they think will isolate or insulate them from having to go back. And so in one breath, we'll say, Jesus paid it all, but we act, Jesus paid just this much, just this much. Because if I truly allow Jesus to pay it all, I might have to change my mind. So you know what? I'm going to be comfortable in my mental state because being in bondage is comfortable for me. And that's what I'm going to do.
Woo! Take us to church. That's the word from the Lord.
Being in bondage there is a comfort level.
Yeah.
Look, the slave that grew up in Southampton has a different mind frame than the slave that was taken from the west coast of Africa. These are two different mind frames. One experienced freedom and it was snatched away. One was born in slavery and died in slavery. Those two individuals, they think different. And so when you are born in a way and you make a conscious decision to say, you know what, I'm comfortable being a slave, then that ain't on the experience, that's on you. So my prayer is that with all of these educated, successful, forward-thinking people around you, brother, that you take a leap and just shed the old mind frame. You ain't got to do nothing different. Just shed the mind frame first.
Because everything else will flow.
Everything else will flow.
Yeah.
I know that we've got to get off. So I'm going to play the other side. I'm going to play the other side of the coin.
How you going to play the other side of the coin?
Play the other side of the coin. I don't know the situation.
Devil advocates.
Yeah. I'm not even. I'm never going to say devil's advocate because I don't want nothing to do with a defeated enemy.
I know that's right.
You have people that we talked about earlier about growth. Sometimes when we're dealing with identity and especially with crisis, sometimes we may run into the situation where to get into a new environment, that's scary.
Yes.
And it's not to say that the person is being a, and I'm gonna use these words. It's not to say that the person is being a coward. It's not saying that the person is being irresponsible. Sometimes the response may appear that way. Mm-hmm. But again, this is why it's so important when it comes to people developing their environment and stuff. And I'm gonna challenge some people. I'm looking kind of out the corner of my eye, and I'm looking at some of the things, and it may be a joke, but I'm gonna tell you that there's some people that sometimes with their identity, they may be wanting to connect in a way that may not be for you, but it doesn't say that you're in a bad place. Right. So, for example, if somebody had me and said, you can choose whatever car you want, I'm gonna automatically go for the Bronco because I'm country. I want utilities. I want to drive in the mud. Those are the things that I want to do, and it defines who I am. But there's a part of me, if you want to look at it from a clinical perspective, I, Dr. Reginald Wells, still struggle with self-esteem. Mm-hmm. I still struggle with pain.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's a real place, though.
Yeah, it's a real place.
In a real moment. And we're not saying that you can't feel how you feel. What we're saying is that you can't stay there because you're not in bondage no more.
Right. And the difference, look, everybody here on the chat and here, we got a book bag of some stuff that we don't like.
Yes,
we all got some bags. We like to throw it away. Mm-hmm. Paul said, God, I prayed 3 times that this thorn be taken away from me. And it's still here.
And it's still in my flesh.
But here's the grace. And how did it get to this conversation? But here's the thing. Then he heard Jesus saying, hey, my grace is sufficient.
My grace is sufficient.
So there is sufficiency for even the things that we hate about ourselves.
Yeah.
Things that follow us around. There's sufficiency for that. But what I think me and Tawanda are saying is, let's not invite the insufficiency along with
it. And that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that it's the person that's saying there's a difference between it's kind of like somebody saying, where do you want to go? I want to go to Africa. I want to go to Africa. Okay. And you get there, you get off the plane and you say, I'm in Africa, but you won't take those steps. You won't go to the hotel. You won't go to the land. You're just there as compared to the person who's walking in it. And it's like, okay, I got to get used to this. And that's where, again, the growth comes in, where that person has to learn how to move in that, but also be very careful that if you do find yourself stuck, and there have been times, like I can say, there have been times where I've been stuck simply because, again, it goes back to the identity of, do you understand who you are? Mm-hmm. And can you pick up from a clinical standpoint, do you understand who you are and who you're growing into? And do you want to move into that? Is there something that is causing fear? Because fear, along with shame, your worst killers are your fear, your rejection, and your shame. Yep. They marry and they like to hang around with each other. Yep. And sometimes you just got to literally say, okay, for the next 3 days, I'm fighting. So I'm you out the house. And somebody gonna get hurt. And I might get scratched up, but I ain't gonna get hurt. And you ain't gonna kill me. Yep. So again, to be able to feel like you say, I can have those things too if I want to. If I want to drive the Escalade, okay, make the plan. But don't tell yourself you shouldn't have it. You know, if I want to pursue that relationship, so those things, what happens when you don't see anything wrong with your identity situation?
He's going to keep going, Dr. Wells. He's going to keep going.
This is one of those shows where you got to do an evening show. You got to do an evening. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes these types of things, you do have to have an evening and just have a question and answer.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to be able to have those avenues where people can be honest too. So,
Tasha, I want you to answer this question. What happens when you don't see anything wrong with your identity situation? What happens when you think it's okay to stay stuck in that mindset of being poor, not having enough to eat, not being broke?
When you got it. When you
got it and have access to even get it if you don't have enough. What do you say to that person?
Dysfunction looks like dysfunction.
Woo!
Wow.
Period.
Because this is the thing, when you're in it, it's hard for you to recognize it's dysfunction. So there are families, relationships, right? And we're not talking about just relationships with a significant other, but we're talking about relationship with yourself first and foremost. So it comes into play where you start saying to yourself, if everybody around you, especially those people who are very important to you, because majority of the time their take opinion matters to you. And if everybody is saying the same thing, now this is very simple. If it walked like a duck, it looked like a
It
duck,
quack like a
and it
duck.
quacked like a duck, it's a duck all day long.
It's a
Simple
duck.
as can be.
It's a
Simple.
It's a duck.
Simple. Right? But that also kind of speaks to that is a safety blanket, is what that is. That is
A
something
safety
that kind of holds you, and it allows you to stay in that
protection.
mindset that is working for me.
yeah, yeah,
But the odds are very high. It ain't working for everybody else.
yeah, yeah.
So,
You know, this was an incredible conversation.
yeah.
It was really good. Dr. Wells, you said something that was so good. You said, you know, there's a difference between that brother that wanted to go to Africa, gets to Africa and is scared to jump off the plane, and then the other brother that goes to Africa, know they're afraid, but say, I'm going to try to work it out anyway. That is, man, that's huge. If we don't leave with nothing, we got to leave with that one. Because, look, that ain't saying that everybody ain't got some fear, but one person goes ahead and conquers that fear, and the other person goes ahead and makes a jacket out of it and wears it. There's a huge difference with that.
That's deep.
That's deep.
And if I leave anybody with anything, like I said, this book is great. Shame Interrupted. Let me take that. Well, I can't see the blood. My Shame Interrupted. I know there's a book that everybody probably grabs. Your Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I really tell people to really get into this book. It's really good. And then for clinicians, the one book that I go to now that everybody probably got on their shelf,
your body keeps the score.
And go to chapter. What and I was going to say, Miss Boone might even name the chapter 4 and 5.
Woo!
So those are one to go to, and you're gonna be there for a while because I stayed there and I was like, okay, let me take notes. Because you know, trauma's trauma.
There's a reason why we're in this field.
Yeah.
There is a reason why, right? Oftentimes we tell ourselves we want to be the helper, but
sometimes we get help.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you got to believe in what you're teaching.
Yep.
You got to believe in that. Just like in ministry, you got to believe in your God and what he can do for you.
That's it.
You got to believe.
Can't teach it unless you believe it.
That's it.
Unless you believe it.
That is it.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and wrap this up, guys. We've been wrapping up with prayer, so let's go ahead and do that. Dr. Wells, can you pray us out today, bro?
Yes, sir. Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you once again for many of us that are securing our identity in you. But all those of us that are continuing to try to understand who we are, and even those that have given identity by you, we're still walking in it and learning. That's the sanctification. You've justified us, and now we're being sanctified. We're praying for those who are still dealing with the crisis part, where something has happened in their lives that have just altered. Every time they look in the mirror, they can't see themselves anymore, or they struggle to see who they're supposed to be, and they're constantly dealing with rejection, and they're dealing with pain and suffering. We ask that, God, you help them to understand the shame, the rejection, even the guilt that tends to mirror and cover our eyes. And we ask that you allow us to get the help, seek the support, but be honest with ourselves and knowing who our identities are and walk in that. Yes. We ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Latasha, thank you so much for joining us, man. It was so much fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all for having me.
So much fun. We got to do it again. We got to run this back. This whole week so far has been great. And tomorrow, what are we getting into tomorrow? Tomorrow
we're talking about I believe it's
hold on.
Let me look.
I'm about to find it right now.
We know what Friday is.
Well,
what's Friday?
We got triggers and trauma tomorrow.
Triggers and traumas tomorrow. Yes. Being able to identify triggers and traumas in your life. And tomorrow we'll have Brenda Ward with us, another clinician. another female clinician. She's gonna come on and help us out to have this courageous conversation. And on Friday, we're gonna probably close it out with God in therapy, because I really, really think that we need to understand that the two is really, really good.
We'll be talking about church hurt, and that presentation will probably go 7 hours straight. So
so we're gonna put that God in therapy with the church.
We might need to put a super chat on this, Jane, so people.
Yeah.
And for everyone who are Tina Turner fans,
make sure that
I know Tina Turner just passed.
Yeah.
Who just passed?
Yes, Tina Turner.
Oh.
89 years old.
Rest in peace, Tina Turner.
I just passed it.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Yeah.
Look, make sure that you visit, go to EY4PC.com. Latasha, shout out your email address, your website address.
All right, whorva.org.
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 Whorva.org. These are two great organizations. We are helping the community, and you definitely, if you have need of a therapist or you just want to poke around and see what options are available, contact us. We are ready to serve you right away. Thank you guys again so much for joining us here. You guys continue to have a very, very powerful week, and we will see you tomorrow.
All right.
Yes. Thank you all so much. Share, and tell them, y'all, listen, we're having the courageous conversation. We're doing this because we believe we do it better together. We want to help one, teach one.
Love y'all.
Yeah.
All right now.
Love y'all. Bye-bye.